Okay, let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from today. Welcome to this webinar on sustainable pest management practices. I am Taylor Ubwa, your host for today. Now, just a little bit about Partners Worldwide and what we do. Partners Worldwide is a global Christian network of business and professional people that are uniquely equipped and positioned to faithfully pursue a world without poverty. So our mission is basically to end poverty so that all may have life and have it abundantly. And our vision is to mobilize long-term hands-on global relationships to form a powerful Christian network that uses business as a way to create flourishing economic environments in all parts of the world. Now, the purpose of this webinar is the first of a series of webinars that will hold throughout the year on agricultural best practices. And so it's intended to help agriculture entrepreneurs thrive in their businesses. So this very first webinar is on sustainable pest management practices. And it's open to anyone in the agriculture sector, anyone interested in agriculture, to the Partners Worldwide Network, and our LCIs. Just some house rules for today. After our facilitator speaks, we will have a Q&A session. Please keep your questions as concise as possible for the sake of time. And we'll be using the Q&A box to write questions during the presentation. So if you look down at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, you should see Q&A. Please do not use the chat function so we don't have any form of distractions during the presentation. Okay, so we will be starting off with a pre-webinar poll, just so we have an idea of where you're joining us from today. So just give me a second and I will display that. And I'll give about a minute for everybody to show where they're joining us from today or their affiliation. Okay, so this should pop on your screen shortly. Hopefully you can see it on your screen so far. If you can, please just vote. Just click your affiliation. I'll give us about 40 seconds more. Still a few people that haven't voted. Okay, I will end the poll now so that we continue. Okay. All right, so today our facilitator is Kevin Marks. He is a facilitator and a member of a BA team here in Nigeria. And just a little bit about him, he's the founder and director of Pioneer Sustainable Agriculture Limited. He is an Israeli American. He's an agriculture businessman and entrepreneur. He's the largest certified organic farmer at the moment in Nigeria. He privately owns several farms across northern Nigeria in Kano State, Kaduna State, and Jigawa State. And more recently, he's also expanding into Niger. His focus crops in Nigeria are moringa, tiger nuts, hibiscus, and carbon farming. We're very pleased to have him here with us today, and we look forward to learning a lot from his wealth of experience in the agricultural sector. All right, please, Kevin, take the floor.
Hey, hi, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Taylor, thank you for the introduction. So we are going to delve into integrated pest management, IPM. It's really one of the cornerstones of sustainable farming practices. And this is not necessarily regarding only to organic agriculture. This is across the board, organic, conventional, and for crops, livestock, plantation crops, points are all relevant. So starting off, what is integrated pest management? Integrated pest management is a system of managing pests which is designed to be sustainable. Professionals like farmers, fishermen, and ranchers have been using IPM techniques for centuries. Now, IPM actually came about as an idea in the late 1800s, the 1880s to be specific. And that the roots of IPM can be traced to when you have the foundation of scientific plant protection being formated. The advent of modern synthetic insecticides, so what we're familiar with when you have a pest or a noxious weed that you have to deal with inside your farmland, the chemical control methods for these kind of problems came about in the 1940s, 1950s, and that resulted in a shift of focus to pesticide technology, right? So up until the point where you had these chemical intervention methods, right, there was a holistic approach that was taken to dealing with pests. Now, over the 30 years from the advent of these chemical intervention methods up until the 1970s, that's when people really, farmers, governments, businesses really started recognizing the limitations of over-reliance on insecticides. You had pests that started to develop pests became resistant. They ended up developing resistance to certain pesticides. We see that here in Nigeria. We see it all over the world. Anytime you use one method too many times, you'll start having bad results, and it'll end up affecting your yields, your outputs. Actually, it was in the U.S. in the 1970s that the U.S. government started to really develop and promote integrated pest management theory. In reality, pesticide-based pest control still predominates global agriculture, but now more and more biologically intensive control technologies are displacing intensive agrochemical technologies. We'll go on to the next slide. Integrated pest management methods. All right, so I'm going to go. I'll start with just crops for now. That's my strong points. I've done a bit of work in livestock, but when it comes to controlling pests, like I said, crops and plantation are my stronger points. So please, anybody who's interested in livestock, bear with me. There will be things from this that are relevant for your operations and practices. Now, if you look at the beginning of this slide, using knowledge about pest habits, life cycles, needs, and dislikes. All right. When you take a field of, let's say, soybean or maize or sorghum or any vegetable crop, right? You can already have an idea Taylor, can you hear me? Are you guys with me?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you. Oh. Kevin, are you there?
Hello, you guys with me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I cut out there for a second. Yep. All right. So when you're going into any type of crop production, you can have a general idea of which challenges you're going to face before you start your season. So most crops have specific pests that attack at specific times uh, and have different effects on your crops. So it's very, very, very important as part of this IPM idea of this approach to already know which challenges you're going to face. Of course, in agriculture, you always have challenges that you are not prepared for, but the ones that you can prepare for, it's best to do so to free up your time and energy for those unforeseen issues that every one of us faces in agriculture. Now, so this first point of using knowledge about pest habits, life cycles, needs, and dislikes, I mentioned a few crops. Let's talk about maize right now. I'm sure most people are familiar with fall armyworm. All right, it's one of the really, really, really problematic pests in maize production, not just here in Nigeria, but across Africa and many parts of the world. Even in the name, fall armyworm, we know about what time of the year that pest is going to become an issue, and that's towards the end of the season in the West, in the US and Europe in the fall. And it's a pest that's going to come in as you're starting to have your grain fill, okay, on your maize crops. That's going to directly affect your yield, the quality of your maize, whether you're using it as a fresh produce, if you're using it as a grain product. If you already have an idea that these pests will be an issue, and if you look over your field histories, your neighboring farmers' field histories, and see, all right, there have been issues in the past with this specific pest, you can already go ahead and start planning for it. The pest habits, its life cycle. Now, the life cycle of pest, I'll continue on about the fall armyworm. It's a caterpillar. It's a Diptera pest. Okay. And the way Diptera pests come into your field is through the adult insect, which is in the form of a moth, right? So you'll have these moths fly into your farm, lay eggs. Those eggs usually hatch after 1 or 2 weeks. They emerge as larvae, and those larvae start eating their way through your maize until they hit the next stage of their reproductive life cycle. Pupate come out as moths and then fly onto other people's fields or elsewhere within your farm. And I had this issue in my moringa farm a few years ago. My moringa farm, it's organic certified, so already I'm very limited in my control methods. I can't just spray any chemical that I go and pick up in the store. I really do have to utilize this integrated pest management method to the fullest to make sure that I am able to protect my crops and get the yields I want at the end of the year. Now, the pest habits and life cycles, those are things that you also can learn with time, right? That does cost money though, right? If you make a mistake, it will affect your yield. So these are points that are worth looking into before you even start planting your crop. Just knowing how your plants grow or your livestock grow or how your tree plants grow, that's not enough. You need to understand every single risk factor that could come up. The needs and dislikes for the pests. Now that can have to do with habitats. When you have grasses grow up inside of a field, weeds, grasses, these can become hiding places for problematic pests. That's why, when you're looking at grass control methods, all right, making sure that you have your mechanical weeding done on time or even your manual weeding done on time. It's not just about protecting the nutrients for your crops to uptake. When you use fertilizer, you don't want to waste it on growing grasses and weeds. It's also about making sure that insects don't have places to hide. They don't have places to breed. They don't have places to lay eggs. All these things have to be matched up, and it does get complicated at a certain point. But like I said, if you plan from the beginning, it can really save a lot of heartache, headache, and time. Use the least toxic methods first. That's one thing I've noticed here in Nigeria. There's usually a rush to use some very, very, very harsh chemicals at the slightest sign of insect infestation. That is a big, big mistake. That's one of the leading reasons for resistance to certain agrochemicals here. For myself, I've even ended up importing agrochemicals, organic certified agrochemicals that I know are not being used here in Nigeria. What's the reason for that? If it's not being used here in Nigeria, I know it has not been misused. Most of the time, misuse is not on purpose. It's because either the product is not at the correct concentration, or farmers are not familiar with the best and most efficient way to use these products. What happens, like I said, you end up with these super insects that are resistant to some of the most common methods of controlling them. When you use the least toxic method first, you're helping protect yourself, you're protecting the environment, you're protecting your soil. And at the end of the day, you're helping all the other farmers around by making sure that you're not contributing to these super pests that, when you go out and spray what should be the last line of defense, that they will be susceptible to it. Monitoring pest activity and adjusting methods over time. When you're looking at a piece of farmland and a farming operation, it's not something that you say, okay, this is a year by year operation. It really needs to be looked at over 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and that's where you start getting to know your soils, your crops, and the pests and how they operate inside certain crops and at certain times of the year. This ties back into using knowledge of the pest habits, life cycles, needs, and dislikes. When you know that an insect likes to come out at night, or it likes to come out very, very early in the morning before the sun comes up, you can adjust your attack methods, your tactics for handling these to make sure that you maximize your efficiency. Here, because of some of the security issues and things like that, I know it is difficult to spray against pests at night. In Israel, for example, 95% of our crop treatments are spraying against pests is done at night. That's when the pests are most active. That's also when certain chemicals that are highly volatile in terms of reactions with sunlight and heat. When you spray at night, you're avoiding those issues, and that's another point of increasing your efficiency. Tolerating harmless pests and promoting predatory pests. This is one that I really, really, truly believe in. A few of my farms, we do have massive populations of predatory pests. Things like praying mantis, ladybugs. There are beneficial insects that go after thrips, mites. Whenever we find these populations of these beneficiary predators within our farms, we always do everything we can to make them comfortable and increase their populations. We've gone as far as taking the egg sacs of praying mantises, moving them into a enclosed area, and then trying to breed them out and spread 2 or 3 of the juvenile praying mantises onto each one of our trees. One praying mantis can clear a tree of caterpillars in a matter of days. This is definitely one of the least toxic methods that you can speak of, right? I mean, you're using nature to your benefit. Also, look, it's cheaper. It's cheaper than going out and buying chemicals or hiring labor to move around your farm and spray. Setting economic thresholds to decide when it's time to act. Back to fall armyworm. Look, that's the kind of insect that if farmers not careful, they can go to sleep at night, wake up in the morning and find a quarter of their hectare destroyed. That might be past the economic threshold of a specific farmer to absorb. You could go and spray them, but by the time the chemical is taken effect, the caterpillars may have cleared off another quarter hectare. You've lost half your yield. Setting economic thresholds, that definitely plays out at the initial stages of IPM, which is where you're planning which problems you might have and then how you're going to handle them if they do occur. Determine if promoting beneficial insects may help prevent or control pests on your crops. That ties back into tolerating harmless pests and promoting predatory pests. Look, when you spray harsh chemicals, these are not specific to certain pests. When you spray, I'm not even familiar with a lot of the names nowadays. It's been several years since I left the conventional agricultural world. I know imicloropid is a popular one here. When you spray imicloropid, it's affecting everything. I mean, if you do have any beneficial pests within your land, they're not going to survive that spray. Harmless pests, things like ants, those can also help you control your harmful pests. They can even help you find when you have pest issues. I don't know how many folks here on this group have done any vegetable farming. Thrips, mites, these sucking pests are very, very, very problematic, especially when you go into dry season production of crops. You can actually use ants to find when you are starting to have problems with insects like thrips and mites. There's a symbiotic relationship between thrips and mites and ants. So if you go and start looking in your crops and you find populations of ants hanging out underneath the leaves of your crop, there's a very good chance that if you keep searching, you're going to find thrips, mites, and these things. So some harmless pests can actually be an early warning system for a farmer to know what they need to do. I guess we can go on to the next one, Taylor, please. Decision-making IPM practice. We talked about setting action thresholds, a point at which pest populations or environmental conditions indicate that pest control action must be taken. Like I said, a farmer waking up in the morning and seeing severe damage to his maize or his grain crop, that might force a farmer's hand to go for the harshest measure to make sure they don't lose everything. For a farmer who's doing organic certified or a farmer who's exporting from Nigeria, right? Maybe that would be the most expedient way to handle that pest issue. But then on the other hand, if they want to send their product abroad, they also have to think about residue level, chemical residue levels on their crop. If you're just before harvest, you can't go start spraying the most noxious chemicals that exist for insect control on your crop, because once it gets to the your off taker, it might be rejected when tested. They'll say these residue limits are past the legal threshold for the EU, for the US. Every country usually has its legal threshold for residues. Monitoring and identifying pests. This ties back into what we discussed earlier of monitoring, identifying your pests so that you do know what you're trying to control and then the best method for controlling them. We can go on to the next one, Taylor. Okay, beneficial pests. I just threw this in there. I think it's interesting. Most people talk about just about the problematic insects that they're dealing with on their farm. And there's all these great bugs out there that'll do your work for you. Assassin bugs, mite predators, beneficial nematodes. Beneficial nematodes actually will keep harmful nematodes from attacking your root systems. Green lacewing, praying mantis, ladybugs, moth egg parasites. Ladybugs and praying mantis are ones that you'll find all over Nigeria. I mean, they're everywhere. My first years on my moringa farm, I started noticing large populations of praying mantis. And like I said, I did everything I could to make them as comfortable as possible. I do beekeeping on that farm as well for some honey production. I'm even careful about using my non-toxic or my least toxic agrochemicals, things like neem oil. If I go and start spraying neem oil during the daytime, when my crops are in their flowering phase, that'll actually deter the bees from going around and pollinating my crop and producing honey. So it's about weighing out the benefits and the costs. Oh, we can go on to the next one. Okay, the action process strategies. Prevention. Tactics designed to reduce the occurrence of pest and disease or create hostile environmental conditions to prevent buildup. Prevention. One of the main things here when it comes to prevention is grass and weed control and making sure that you have a clean environment when you start off your farming season. By clear environment, that means making sure that you don't have big piles of waste product from the previous season sitting at the edge of the field. It means making sure that you don't have tall stands of grass within 25 to 50 meters of your fields. These are all places that pests love to reproduce in, they love to hide in. Matter of fact, when you go and spray, insects are smart. Yeah, they can sense danger. When you go and spray a chemical that makes an insect uncomfortable, they're not going to stick around. If they can get out of your field in time, they'll actually go just sit, like I said, 50, 100 meters from your land, wait. Once the smell or the fumes or whatever you've applied in that area have reduced, they'll just move back in. So you'll actually end up having the same insects just coming back into your farmland if they have a safe place to go and hide. Suppression. Okay, tactics directed against the pest or disease. Methods include suppression and cultural methods. Now, suppression methods, right, would be things like spraying, whether you're using an organic chemical or non-organic chemical. Cultural methods are things like crop rotation, right? Not giving your insects the benefit of coming in and finding the same thing in the field year after year after year after year. Cultural methods. Weeding. Yeah, good grass control, whichever method you're using, whether it's chemical, mechanical, by hand. Like I said, clearing your fields of hiding places for insects is actually one of the most simple and cost-effective ways of controlling insects before you actually have a problem from them. Other cultural methods can include push and pull. There's certain flowering crops, and I'm not going to go too much into the details of these. There are certain flowering crops that you can plant along the edges of your field that will push away pests before they come in. I mean, they'll find this barrier that, certain smells or tastes coming off of these flowers make them extremely uncomfortable, move on to the next field. That's the push. You have another thing called the pull. So push-pull, that's where you have a certain type of plant pushing away pests. And then you have another predetermined area where you plant something that you know those insects actually do like more than your own crop. And that pulls them in that area. So then you end up with the majority of the pests that would be attacking your crop pulled into an area where you can deal with them at your convenience. This one is a little more complicated, but it is something that can be learned over time. None of this, it's science, but it's not rocket science. I'm a big believer in the push-pull. Neem dogonjaro, it's an excellent one for this. Also, you can use the leaves for making low toxicity insecticides. Same thing with the seed oil. Even the tree itself, pests try to avoid that tree. Another one is giving an environment, a comfortable environment for predators that do deal with these type of pests. Look, if somebody's farming rice, they're not going to want birds. They're not going to want birds around their farm. I understand that. But on the other hand, birds do really help control pest populations. These are all things that I really started to appreciate when I went organic, and I gave my land time to rebuild its natural flora and fauna, including in the soil. It's about balance. And when you talk about IPM, it really is the balance of the science of agriculture, of pest control, of understanding their life cycles. Practical ways to practice IPM in Nigeria. All right, so here in Nigeria, we do have a lot of issues when it comes to access to quality inputs. Almost any farmer that any of us will talk to will complain about, the one time they got this one fertilizer and it wasn't what was promised, or it didn't have the promised effect. It's very unfortunate. It's one of the big things holding us back out here in terms of agricultural efficiency and yield increases. This does, though, open up the opportunity for us to, think and find other ways around these type of problems. So when we look at practical ways of practicing IPM in Nigeria, well, in the states where I'm from, we call it farmerizing. That's where, all right, so I could, a few years ago, I couldn't get access to organic certified inputs that I would use on my farm. So I started looking around locally. All right, what can I get, process, and use myself that will fall in line with organic requirements, but will also handle the issues I'm having on my farm? I'll go back to Neem. I went in the markets, bought up Neem seed, had it pressed for me, and then started using Neem oil as a suppressant, not as an insecticide, more as an insect suppressant. So when I knew that mites would start moving into my fields, I would go ahead and preemptively apply Neem, knowing that when the mites come in, and as soon as they get a taste of my moringa leaf, and they taste that Neem, they're going to move on. If they don't move on, that's when I would go up one step to a more toxic control method. With organics, you also use toxic products. There are some fermented bacterias that I use. Those ones I do bring from abroad. One way that I have really been able to reduce my logistics headaches and costs was I actually went ahead and bought bacterial cultures. And then on a very, very limited scale, started producing my own fermented bacteria to apply within my fields. Like I said, we can't just go to the store and get all the products we need here. So we have to, use our brains and figure out smart, cost-effective ways to get this done. Another important point here is that most of the insects, most of the problematic insects that we'll find here have been around for generations. These are things that local farmers, guys who might not necessarily know how to read and write properly, can tell you the exact life cycle of one of these insects and the best way to deal with it. So using that local knowledge is very, very, very important. I've learned so much from my, just from like simple, unskilled labor on my farm who, because them and their families have been farming in the villages nearby, they know these pests. They know it far better than I do. I can go and read online or find books all day, but that's still just theoretical. Looking at the practical and accessing that knowledge is integral. I mean, I cannot stress that enough, how important it is to putting together good integrated pest management systems. There was one other point, just bear with me for a second. Sorry. Now, back to the mechanical, biological, and least toxic control methods. I thought this was a good point. I just wanted to read through with everybody. If all other methods have failed and monitoring shows that your pest population is still above your action thresholds. Now, action thresholds, like I said, was deciding, when and how you need to deal with any given problem on your farm. Use mechanical methods such as sticky traps, biological controls like pheromones, and parasitic insects. Now, access to inputs is a problem here. We can't go get any type of biological control we want, like pheromone traps and things like that. Traps are out there, sticky traps. I don't know if everybody's familiar with these yellow sticky traps. A lot of countries in the world, you'll see those deployed in fields. Yellow sticky trap works a lot like a fly trap or a rat trap, and it's just a yellow sheet with blue. All right. That does help you reduce the population of breeding insects within your farm, but also it serves as a pre-warning system. You actually go out and you can see which type of insect populations are inside your farm. It's always better to know before it becomes a problem, and then have your ideas of how you're going to deal with it. Once you've taken these mechanical methods, only then should you consider spot treatment with the least toxic pesticides possible. You must weigh the risks associated with the use of pesticide against the problems caused by the pest. Consider your options carefully, being mindful not to blindly jump at a solution that may have risks without first collecting the facts. If you must use a pesticide, you should choose the least toxic pesticide available. Remember, all pesticides are poisons designed to kill. They should be handled carefully with respect and according to their labels. I have a list here of some low toxicity pesticides. A few of them are boric acid, silica gels, diatomaceous earth, non-volatile insect and rodent baits, okay? Microbe-based pesticides, and pesticides made with essential oils. That's like being the neem. There's also quite a few flowers that you can find growing out here in the wild. If you grind it with water, sieve out the juice afterwards, and spray these, you'd be amazed what some of these, locally available things you can go out in the bush and pick, what they can do to deter pests. With the decision-making process, back to the action thresholds, this is a very important one. There's always going to be pests inside of a farm. Even if you spray your farm with the most noxious chemicals known to man, you will find one insect somewhere. It's not possible to completely remove those from the environment, and you wouldn't want to anyways. If you go into your farm and you see pests and you notice that the damage that they're doing at any given point is not that great, you as the farmer have to make the decision, all right, is this a problem that I need to deal with now? Is it a problem that can be put off and I'll deal with it later? Or is, me putting this off going to lead to a massive issue that I'm going to regret down the road? Each farmer's going to have to make their own decision for that. These are, this is more of a philosophical art form than an exact science, right? Because me, for example, I'll say, all right, this is hurting my crop, but the whole idea of my farms being sustainable and having healthy products, organic certified products, I might say, all right, I'll take a 25% reduction in yield against applying even an organic certified chemical that I know will be harmful to the environment. Everything we spray ends up back in the water, in the air, the birds, and the fish, and the frogs. That's up to each individual farmer to decide for themselves. Record keeping is extremely, extremely important to building up a good IMP. That's the only way you'll be able to establish trends, patterns for pest outbreaks. As you apply 2-3 different products over a season, you'll be able to see which one works the best, which one costs you the most or the least. And based on that, you're going to be able to come up with recommendations for future prevention against the same pests or similar pests. I know I've been jumping around a little bit all over the place. I hope everybody's been able to follow me. I mean, there's just so much information to pack into here. Taylor, was that the last slide, or do we have one more after that?
That is the last slide, Kevin.
Gotcha. So
Yes.
Taylor, was there anything I failed to touch on from my own slides?
You're the expert, so I think you did pretty well.
Yeah.
Well, right now we'll throw the floor open for questions and answers. So please, if you have any questions for Kevin, right now this will be the time to ask your questions. You can use the Q&A box and type your question or raise your hand if you want to voice out your question.
I mean, there must be some questions. I mean, I wasn't that clear on everything, was I?
Oh, we'll just give a few minutes and see. So is everyone comfortable with the Q&A box? Or if you'd like to ask a question, you can raise your hand and you know, or just unmute and ask your question.
So while everyone thinks, and there you go. Yeah, I was going to ask mine, but we have a question already, so we hand.
Okay, so Kevin, there's Dorcas here asking, what are some of the wildflowers used as pesticides? You're on mute, Kevin.
Sorry, that depends on which type of pests you're looking to what you're looking to deal with. What could you give me an example of the type of pest that you are looking to handle from that? Dorcas?
Dorcas, feel free to unmute and let him know. Okay, I'll mute you. Let's see.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes, we can hear you.
more of the mites and the arachnids on my vegetable
Okay.
farms.
Okay.
Because I
Okay.
want
So,
to.
yeah, I know that issue. If you're dealing with those small sucking insects, actually the best way to do it, you're familiar with black soap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can actually take black soap. Obviously, anytime you're going to use something new on your crops, you want to test it out first to make sure it doesn't have a negative effect on it. So I'm not telling anybody to go and start doing any of these on a massive scale, right? Always test out before you do anything. If you take black soap, mix it with water. I don't remember the exact measurement, but let's say for a backpack sprayer, a normal 16-liter backpack sprayer, if you were to add maybe half a liter of water that you've already mixed in a significant amount of soap, I mean a few tablespoons of the black soap, if you spray that, that'll actually kill those insects.
All right.
They can't, it coats their body, they can't breathe.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and on vegetable farming, it's like a really good practical way to do it. I don't know how big the area you're talking about is, but I would give that a try. And then it's just about making sure that you spray underneath the leaves as well.
As well, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, black soap is a great one for those small sucking pests. It's excellent. I would recommend that before anything. And then I see a question here from Blessing about Neem, about getting pesticide from Neem. There's two ways you can get pesticide from Neem. You can get from the oil from the seed, okay? Or you can take the neem leaf, the dogon yarrow leaf, you grind it with water, you sieve off the water from the solids. That's a pesticide in itself. you can actually mix that, either of those with the black soap water and spray that, and that'll work against a number of pests. When you start talking about like the more hardy pests, like the caterpillars, fall armyworms, things like that, it becomes a little less efficient. And that's where IPM comes in, about making sure that you have your traps deployed so you can identify the pests before they come in, that you don't have hiding places for those pests to lurk on the edges or within your fields. I don't think anybody here is organic certified. So that also leaves it leaves a big toolbox in terms of products for you to use. Vegetables for human consumption, I'm always an advocate for not spraying, too much chemical on it, because you don't want your end users or yourself eating all that. Right? So if you start off with those, you might find a good solution. It might even be something where you do need to use a stronger chemical during the growth season, but as you get closer to harvest, right, you decide, all right, 2 to 3 weeks before harvest, I do not want to use any more harsh chemicals on my product because humans are going to be consuming this. Then you can integrate one of these mixtures of, like I said, black soap and neem oil seed, or black soap and the neem leaf mixture.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Good luck. And then Yossi, I really did not get the practical ways to practice IPM. All right, so like, do you mean how to tie everything together, or why don't you give me your specific case, and I'll try to make things a bit more concise for you.
Yossi, you're still muted, just in case you're speaking. So please unmute and ask your question.
Yossi, if you look at the bottom left of your screen, you should see a button that says mute. So if you press on that, you'll be able to unmute yourself, and then we can hear you.
Or if you prefer to just type your response in the Q&A box, that's fine.
Okay, well, look, let me give an answer then, right? So Yossi, let's look at it this way, because I was all over the place a bit. If you're looking for a practical way to practice integrated pest management, let's look at it like this. Number one, you have your crop or your livestock or your tree, whatever you're going to be growing, whatever you're going to be producing. All right. Hopefully you'll have some comfort in knowing about the product that you're gonna be producing. From that point, it's about identifying future issues before they come up. So that would be the pests, right? All right, like I'll go back to the maize one. You know how to grow maize. You know what the fertilizer requirements are. You know your planting dates. You know what you need to do against grasses, right? So you already have that roadmap for yourself, right? Then it's about saying, all right, these are potential pests that I might have, I might not have. These are pests that I've heard about in the area that I'm growing this. Local farmers have told me that 2 years ago there was this pest that came in and caused problems for this type of crop. You want to already start anticipating the issues before they become issues. Hello.
Hello, I'm Yossi. Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Concerning the practical ways, I really did not get, so I did not really get what you are saying.
Okay, so so Yossi, what are you farming? What are you farming?
Tomatoes, pepper,
Okay.
garden egg, and so on.
Okay, perfect. So, all right, let's take tomato. All right, everybody knows the big issue that happened a few years ago with tomato, tuta absoluta. Remember? I think they were calling it tomato Ebola at one point, right? So if you're farming tomatoes and you're worried about something like Tuta absoluta coming in and destroying your crop, right? A practical way of practicing IPM, right, is having mechanical methods in place. Now, if you're dealing with multiple hectares of tomato crop, it's not possible to do this. But something as simple as netting, even on an open field crop, on an open field crop, to making sure that the moths don't get access to your tomatoes to lay their eggs, right, and start that reproductive cycle that'll end up seeing your crop destroyed, God forbid. That is a practical step of IPM, right? That's a mechanical step. You haven't applied any chemicals. You could even take an old mosquito net, right, and spread it over your tomato plants, something like that. Like I said, once you start talking about bigger areas, yes, there's certain things that are not practical. That would be where there's you lose that cost efficiency, and it's cheaper to take another measure. It's, I mean, I guess the most simple way of explaining this is IPM is like taking your toolbox, taking all your tools out of your toolbox, laying them out in front of you, right? And then putting things in order and saying, all right, this is the first tool I'm going to use. I'm going to use this tool before I even have a problem because it's not too expensive, right? And I know it'll help mitigate risk, right? You use that one tool from the get-go, right? Now you have another 10 tools remaining in your toolbox, right? It's about putting those action thresholds where when you start seeing holes in your tomatoes, you start noticing some holes, you already have a plan for that. You already have prepared and said, all right, as soon as I start seeing this issue in my crop, this is the item, this is the tool I'm going to deploy. There's all these other philosophies that come into it, like least toxic method first, or mechanical before chemical. That's up to each individual. This is not a hard, fast science, what we're talking about here. This is taking the hard, fast science of agriculture and then also working an entire philosophy into it. Does that clear it up for you at all, Yossi?
Yossi, you're on mute. I muted you because of the noise.
Okay.
So just, yeah, okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I got it.
I mean, it's still not. I mean, I'm trying to give an analogy, but like I said, using a mechanical method, using the least expensive method, using the least harmful methods, and then it's like, it escalates. Like I said, it escalates. Even for me, for my farms, right? For an organic certified farm, if I saw that if I was taking all my IPM steps and making sure that I was following organic agricultural procedures and methods, maybe at a certain point, I'll say, look, if I don't go for this step, I'm going to lose everything, right? Then yes, a lot of the philosophy would have to go out the window, and I'd have to take a practical step, whether I like it or not, to make sure that I don't lose everything. That's the idea. Like I said, it's not hard and fast. It's, and it takes time to get used to these things. It really does take time, and it's multi-layered, right? Let me give you one example I have going on now on one of my farms. We're doing grass control. Right now, I can't spray herbicides. So I have to use mechanical methods. So I use a rotavator, basically just something like a giant lawnmower that also tears up the topsoil a bit and works the grasses and weeds back into my topsoil to build up my organic matter. So I know that when I start working the grasses, when I start clearing the weeds inside my plantation, I know that all the pests there inside those grasses are going to now move up to the trees, right? Pests, all these pests, they've existed long before humans started doing organized agriculture. They were out in the bush, in the fields, in the forest, eating plants that are just growing there in the wild. Pests usually go for the most nutritious and easiest food sources available, right? Just like any animal, they want to use the least amount of energy to get the highest amount of energy possible. When I start tearing up the grasses in my farm, I know within a few hours that any pests that are there inside those grasses are going to move to my trees. So I already take measures to make sure that when those insects go into my trees, that they find it very uncomfortable and unappetizing. I do that with things like black soap mixed with neem oil, right? I'll spray a day before, right? And that way the next day when we do that work, the pests are just going to move elsewhere. They'll fly or crawl out of there. That's IPM. That's IPM. It's just it's planning. It's planning.
All right. Any more questions? I don't see any more. Oh, okay, there's one. A question from Blessing. Kevin, I don't know if you can see it. How effective can Neem mix with other chemicals as an insecticide? Because I'm also into paint production. Can the Neem also act in paint as an insect repellent?
That's a good question. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It's interesting. I've never really looked at that. I mean, Neem's a really interesting product. One of the reasons I love it is because of how plentiful it is here, right? It's available all across the country. So that means it's not too expensive. It works well against a lot of pests, and it's not too toxic. One of the big things I use it for is a soil drench. So when I see that some of my crops are starting to have problem, possibly from the roots, like a fungal or bacterial problem from the roots, I'll usually do a neem drench around the root zone of that specific plant or that field. And it'll even kill off nematodes and fungi. It's an anti-fungicide as well. I don't know. I don't know what other chemicals are in paints. So yeah, but you should try it. You should try it for an experiment. If it works, you might make a lot of money.
All right. Any other questions? Seems like we don't have any other questions. Jeremiah, did you want to ask your question now?
Yeah, no, actually, Kevin has answered the question already. It was about knowing the tipping point, just when to decide how to take action or to hold back. It looks like a lot of planning and budgeting needs to go into whatever you're planting. So you need to know the price of the products that you're going to sell and monitor that. Or how exactly practically does that work, Kevin? How do you actually in figures, in budget at what point you need to act or to just hold back?
Okay, so that's a really good question, and I do a lot of my farming from Excel, right? I also work by numbers. That's the action threshold you're talking about. So you take 1 hectare of any given crop, Mr. Jeremiah, you will have your expected yield. That's why and another point, I'm getting off IPM a bit, but that's why it is important to know, the measure of your land, your yield in kgs and your tons. Yeah, I mean, this, out here, most folks work in bags or tares. That makes it a little bit more difficult to quantify. It adds a lot of work to the math. When you're expecting, let's say, 2 tons from your farm of any given product, and the major pest issue that you're going to face is a type of insect that might affect your crop by 50%, your yield by 50%. So instead of getting 2 tons, you get 1 ton. You can put a number on there. You can put a monetary figure on there, right? And then weigh that against the intervention suppression methods that you can take, right? So if a ton of this product is worth 100,000 naira, okay, you're expecting to get your 200,000 naira of revenue from your farming, right? You already know your other costs. You know your fertilizer costs, your labor costs, your land costs, right? You'll say, all right, I'm expecting 200,000 naira worth of revenue. My operational costs, my usual operational costs, if everything is going well, just my input costs, right? Things like that are going to be 75,000, right? So it's 200,000 minus 75, you're now at 125,000 naira of profit, right? So you have your 200,000 naira of revenue, 100,000 per ton, 2 tons yield on a hectare. 75,000 naira cost to produce those 2 metric tons, right? Yeah. And now you say, all right, this crop I'm growing though, last year in the area, there was an insect that came in and wiped out 50% of the farmer's yields in the area, right? You can put a figure on that and say, all right, well, that would be another, that would be 1 ton out. So now you have that 100,000, right? You're only getting 100,000 naira of revenue from your 1 ton that survives if the insects attack, right? Minus your 75, that leaves you 25,000 naira profit. All right, are you following me? Is it better if I write this up?
Yeah, I'm following. I'm following. Yeah.
Okay, right. So, all right, got you. So, now, in order for you to suppress that insect, right? The best method to suppress that insect costs you, I don't know, 25,000 naira on that hectare. Okay, right? You've increased your cost from 75,000 to 100,000, but you've guaranteed yourself, yeah, as much as you can guarantee anything in agriculture, you've guaranteed yourself that 200,000 naira revenue. So you've increased your cost by 25, right? Using that suppression method or that control method, but you've ensured that you're going to get your 200,000 naira out of it, right? Now, it might be a different scenario, right? It might be the opposite scenario where the suppression or control method is too expensive. Right? Yeah. And what would be the point of that? Yeah, to spend more money to control an insect than what you're going to get out by controlling that insect. So it's farm specific. There's no one size fits all. But it's a great question, Mr. Jeremiah. And there, I hope my answer was clear enough for that.
Absolutely. Thanks much.
Perfect.
All right, Kevin. There's 2 more questions in here.
Okay.
Question from
Patricia. At what stage of crops do you apply the neem chemical? It depends, Patricia. There's some. All right, let me give you an example. Many crops are pollinated by insects, right? So if you have a crop that is insect pollination dependent, and you spray neem just around the time of flowering, you might actually deter those beneficial insects like bees, yeah, butterflies, things like that would actually come around, pollinate your crop and produce or increase your yield. So there's no exact stage of all crops that you would apply neem. I hope that helps you a bit. You know, it's like I said, it is farm and crop specific. And then Blessing asks, neem is known to be bitter when sprayed on a vegetable plantation, will not affect the taste of the vegetable. Yeah, I mean, if you're eating the vegetables right off the plant, but if you wash it, yeah, you won't have that issue. And you're not spraying concentrated neem. You're mixing it with, like I said, water and black soap. Neem breaks down the active compound in neem. It's called azadirachtin, and it actually breaks down quite quickly in sunlight. Yeah, you won't want to spray neem on your vegetables right before you take them to market. But no, it's not going to leave a residual taste. I'd give it a try, Blessing. I think you'd be pleased with the results. And none of these are one size fit one. Excuse me. None of these are wonder solutions. None of these are a magic bullet to controlling pests. That's why IPM as a theory exists, right? It's about mixing and matching as many methods as possible to get the results you want. Somebody who's farming tomato up in Jos is going to have a completely different experience than somebody growing it in Kano, right? In terms of pests, diseases. Same thing with controlling them. Same thing. Maybe farmers in Kano use one method of controlling that the insects have become used to, whereas in Jos, the insects are used to another control method. And when I say used to, I mean it's no longer efficient, right?
Thank you. I'm guessing there's no more questions at this point. I will give 30 seconds more to see if anything pops up in the Q&A box. Otherwise, I would consider it, we are satisfied with the webinar. All right, in the meantime, I'll just say, Kevin, thank you so much. This has been very knowledgeable and insightful, hopefully for everybody. And okay, I think we are done with questions. So right now, very quickly, we'll take a post-webinar poll, which will pop up on your screens shortly. And we'll take about a minute to complete this.
I'm not gonna take the poll, right?
No, you don't take the poll. Okay, we're about 60%. Still a few more people. Okay. Or 80% there. It'll be nice if we can get close to 100. Okay. All right. Well, this has been nice. Thank you all so much for attending. Thank you to all those that tuned in for this webinar. I hope you look forward to the next webinar, which will cover another aspect of agriculture, and we will keep you all informed. Thanks so much to our facilitator, to my co-host and supporter for this first webinar, Mr. Jeremiah, thank you so much. And hope you all have enjoyed the rest of your day. Thank you all.
Thanks much. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Taylor. Thanks, attendees. Bye for now. All right.
Bye.